this is BJ, and thank you for joining me for another edition of Read It Again. If this is your first time here, I really appreciate the fact that you came to check out my channel. Feel free to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. If this is not your first time, if you're already a subscriber, go ahead and ring that bell if you haven't done so already. Anyways, let's just go ahead and get into it. Now, this is just me at the beginning. Most of the video is not going to be me talking to you. What happened this weekend on Saturday, I went into East Jerusalem, to the old city of Jerusalem, for the very first time. And my intention was I was going to go in there and select certain different locations or certain different vantage points to record parts of my June wrap-up video, talking about the books that I read this past month. However, once I got there, the very first place I went to was Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this is going to be a fairly short video, and all of it, once I'm done talking to you, all of this is going to be from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I got out of there, I went in, I visited, I took some photos and some videos, and I saw what was there. And then I came out, and my intention was to shoot and talk a little bit from the outside of there. However, going in impacted me more than I expected it to, and going in changed me more than I thought it would. The reason for this, now I understand and I have a pretty good solid background in history, and especially biblical history and theological history, church history. So I recognize that everything that is in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is not original. They're inside this one building. Inside this one building, they have the place where Christ was supposedly crucified. They have the place where Christ supposedly was buried. They have the place where he had his trial. They have two different prisons that he supposedly stayed in. So if you're looking at the end of the Gospels, and if you're looking at the end of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, all four of the Gospels get very descriptive on what happened with Christ. And inside this church, the events in those Gospels supposedly all took place in this. Now, it's a fairly large church, but supposedly everything happened within like a block of each other. And all of these events supposedly were right on top of each other. Now, we know that's not true. So where did the tradition come from that these all occurred in this location? And they really came from Constantine's mother. Constantine was pretty much the first truly Christian Roman Empire. Question on the truly. But at the end of his life, he was baptized as a Christian, and most of his life he did give legitimacy. He was the first emperor to openly accept and welcome the Christians and not persecute them, and not at best tolerate them, at worst try to kill them all, which many of the earlier emperors had done. Constantine was the first one to not do that. Now, Constantine's mother was herself a very devout Christian, and you could kind of say she was really the first amateur archaeologist, and because she went into this land and she went into the Holy Land and wanted to see these places for herself, like many thousands and millions of pilgrims have done since that time. And pretty much everywhere she went, she'd go to a location and say, oh, here's a cross. This must have been the cross that Jesus died on. We know that's not true. We know that historically that's not possible. And many of the locations that are talked about, we know simply cannot exist, because in both 60 AD and 120 AD, the entire city was leveled. In fact, Jesus himself prophesied that not one stone will be left upon another. So many of the buildings, everything we see is later than that. And we also, archaeological records and historical records now, we know pretty well where Golgotha was, where Christ was crucified. And we have a pretty good idea of where he was buried. And the tomb inside the Holy Sepulchre is not Jesus' tomb. And the location they have inside there is not the location Jesus was truly crucified at. And I've known that, and I know that. And I went in there as a skeptic. And I went in there thinking, well, yeah, let's just see what, they believe. And knowing that it's not accurate. And we will in the future look at very close to, if not the exact locations Jesus did die and Jesus did rise. We will look to those in future videos. However, I went into the Holy Sepulchre with this in mind, knowing that some parts of the Christian tradition believe this, and a lot of other people that are ignorant, they just go and this is what the tour information says, and so they just follow it. So I went in as a skeptic, but as I was there, something touched me, and something changed my heart and changed my attitude. And it wasn't the building. The building is beautiful, and the artwork on the walls is beautiful, and all of that. The environment itself is beautiful, but that isn't what truly impacted me. What truly impacted me was the people that were there. Now, I was actually in line to one of the first things I did when I went in. I was in line to see the tomb. I was kind of like walking through the thing backwards, but I was in line to see the tomb. And in front of me, there was a Eritrean couple. It was a Coptic Christians. They were probably in their 50s or early 60s, husband and wife couple that were there. Next to them, there was an older Asian couple. And again, an older couple, I want to say South Korea. I honestly don't remember right now, but I believe they were South Koreans. And behind me, there was this large group that was from America, some of them were Texas and some of them were Louisiana, but there was this large group that came together as a tour group. And as you're looking through this line, you're seeing all these different people, and the people behind me were actually Pentecostals. The Korean couple were Baptists. Like I said, the Eritrean couple were Coptic. And all these different people from all over the world, from all these different walks of faith and all these different Christian traditions were all inside this one church. Now, I'm from a fairly low church tradition, and so for me, I'm not big on the incense and the beautiful buildings and all of that. However, for other people, that is how they worship, and that is what they're doing. So some people would go through and see the tomb and be like, "Oh, that's nice," and then others would get to the tomb and they would kneel before it and would just start weeping, because it's just a different way or a different understanding of how we worship. And it brought to mind as I'm going through there and I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing the way this location that I know is wrong, but the way that this location is impacting different people. It's not about accuracy at this point. It's not about whether this location is accurate. What it was about was all these people are coming to this place and coming to this area as a touch point to remember what God had done. And different people would recognize that and do it in different ways, but everybody that was going in there is being impacted. And everyone that is going in there, there is no question, they are remembering the suffering and the pain and the horrible torment that Christ went through, and then the empty tomb. The fact that he was victorious over death. No matter how we celebrate, and honestly, some of the way some other Christians celebrate will be uncomfortable for me. And maybe for you, you grew up in maybe a Baptist or a Methodist or a Pentecostal tradition, and the way some other people would celebrate would be uncomfortable for you. Or maybe you're from a Catholic or an Orthodox tradition, and the way Pentecostals start raising their hand, and that might be uncomfortable for you. But there will come a point, Revelation talks about, there is coming a point in time where people from every ethnicity, every country, every language, every tongue are going to gather together to worship. And we are all going to be doing the same thing in different ways. And that's what I was seeing at this tomb. And that's what I was seeing at this Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And it was beautiful. At times, it was uncomfortable. It's not what I'm used to, but it was beautiful. So here I'm going to show you the pictures of what I saw and some of the videos of what I saw. And while it is doing, I'm also going to play for you. On Sunday, the very next day, I went to a church where virtually everything was in Arabic. And so these are Arabic Palestinian Christians worshiping God in Arabic. And so you're going to hear that music while this plays. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you remember that it's not about the buildings, and it's not about the archaeology, and it's not about the history. It's about what God has done. And it's about the fact that every people from every language and every tongue and every tribe are going to come together, just like they were, to worship God. I went in as a skeptic, but I came out as a worshiper.
إلى قلبي هيهني للطريق